Hello, continuing reading our book, Ereth's Birthday by Avi. Today is Chapter 4, In Pursuit of Salt. The day grew colder. Not that Ereth cared. He rushed on, completely absorbed in the anticipated pleasures of salt. At times, his desire was so great he began to salivate, producing great drools of spit, which he sucked up noisily. So focused were his thoughts on salt that he failed to notice when it began to snow, coming with a breathless, hurried hush. The snow's silence was intense, swallowing every sound like a sponge absorbing water. Within moments, the entire forest became utterly still. The snow was an inch deep before Ereth even realized it was there. Suddenly, he could not see his own paws. Surprised, he gazed up. For just a moment, Ereth imagined that it wasn't snow falling, but salt, and his heart leaped with joy. Then a particularly large flake of snow landed on his nose and made him sneeze. That brought him to his senses. "Ugh, stupid snow," he complained. "You would think it would have the decency to wait until I got to where I'm going before it started." Though Ereth knew the snow would make traveling harder, not for a moment did he consider returning home. "No, what do I care?" he told himself. "It's my birthday. Who needs noisy mice? The salt will taste even better when I get there." With an angry shake of his head, as if that could get rid of the snow, Ereth pushed on. Leaping silently from tree branch to tree branch, Marty the fisher followed. The snow tumbled from the sky like confetti from a barrel. It sleeved tree branches in white. It hid rocks and stumps. It covered the land until its surface became round and soft, melding into one continuous undulating form. It was as if an enormous eraser were rubbing out the world, leaving nothing but one vast sheet of blank white paper. Only Ereth, like a solitary dark dot, moved across it. Becoming weary, Ereth paused and looked back over his shoulder at the trail he was making. To his surprise, it did not extend very far. Like a ghost, he left no tracks. The thought startled him. Then he realized it was only that the snow had covered his paw prints. Shifting his gaze forward, the porcupine tried to calculate how far he would have to go before he reached the cabin. A good way. Sighing with frustration, he told himself yet again that the salt would make his efforts worthwhile. He went on. The snow became so deep it was increasingly difficult to keep his chin above the surface. "Elephant elbows," Ereth swore, beginning to falter for the first time. He glanced back. For just a second, he thought something was following him. "Nonsense," he muttered, reminding himself yet again of the tasty treat that lay ahead. He pushed on one step at a time. The sky grew darker, the air colder, the snow deeper. The trip was taking hours. "Oh, stop snowing!" Ereth shouted at the unrelenting sky. "Can't you see I'm trying to get some salt?" There was no reply. Pausing to catch his breath, Ereth began to wonder if he would ever reach the cabin. As he recalled, the trail led over a small hill. Beyond that, right on the shores of Long Lake, was the cabin. Perhaps he should go home. He turned to look back. Once again, he had the brief sensation that something was stalking him. "You're acting like an old creature," Ereth chided himself. "Imagining things." And he moved on. Marty the fisher, high in a tree, seeing Ereth look back, ducked away in haste. He need not have bothered. Ereth merely glanced back before continuing on. "Good," Marty muttered. "All I need is to be patient, very patient." "No," Ereth said under his breath as he trudged along. "I've come too far to go back. Besides," he reminded himself for the millionth time, it was his birthday. Back home, there was nothing but raucous children. Better to be alone than to be in the midst of a crowd and ignored. The porcupine did consider climbing a tree to wait out the storm. He shook his head. No, I'm too close to Salt. He went on. Ereth blinked open his eyes. Had he fallen asleep? Had he stopped? Had he walked in his sleep? If so, how far had he gone? Ereth peered to the right and to the left. The landscape revealed nothing. The forest was just as white as the last time he looked. For all he knew, he might have gone a mile or 10, or perhaps he'd fallen asleep and hadn't moved at all. He looked back. Was something there? No, he was getting silly. With a shake of his quills, sloughing off what felt like a ton of snow, Ereth forced himself forward again. But it had become very hard to walk. Perhaps, he told himself by way of encouragement, he was just climbing the hill, the last obstacle before reaching the cabin. He did know he was feeling lightheaded. Hadn't he thought something was following him? Even so, he took one slow step after another slow step, like a wind-up toy running down. Suddenly, his way seemed easier. Lifting his head, Ereth looked forward. With the swirling snow in his eyes, it took a moment for him to realize he was looking down a hill, beyond which was an open space. At the bottom, Ereth saw a large mound of snow. In one or two places, light seemed to glow from within the mound. Sticking up from the top of the mound was a silver pipe from which smoke, dark smoke, drifted. The smoke carried the smell of roasting meat. Ereth, a vegetarian, curled his lips in disgust. But the evidence was plain. The open space was Long Lake. Buried in the snow was the log cabin. The cabin would have salt, but inside the cabin were humans. And that's the end of chapter 4.